quickly before we get into our checkout, something that we kind of briefly touched on at the end of last episode, and something that I just think is funny, kind of given the space that we're in now, is you briefly mentioned reality TV and more specifically America's Next Top Model with the documentary that just released and kind of the spotlight it brought back to Tyra more specifically, but also the idea of what reality TV looked like in the 2000s versus the world that we're living in now. And I don't know if for y'all that are watching or listening, if y'all have seen the documentary. If not, it's only 3 episodes. Go watch it. It's not that bad. Well, lengthwise, it's not that bad. But in terms of the content and the subject matter of it all, it's interesting. I think one of the main takeaways and one of the main reasons for the documentary was, as they kind of speak to in it, the series kind of being rewatched and becoming popular again in the midst of kind of like COVID, but also it's 2020 now. So, the world is much different than it was and in the mid 2000s. A lot of things ain't flying no more. We more well informed now, so a lot of these things ain't supposed to be happening, but they was happening back then. So there was this uproar, and I'm not really sure what people expected from Tyra, let alone the documentary in general. But yeah, some people don't care that we in a new age, in a new time. Some people are just like, yeah, that's what it takes, and that's what it was, and I'm not necessarily sorry for that aspect of it. And I do think that's an intricate balance. But yeah, what was your like kind of like main takeaway from all of that documentary, Tyra, context, all the things combined?
First and foremost, my guilty pleasure in life is reality competition TV. So even then, as I'm watching as a child, a younger person, I was very much into America's Next Top Model. You mean you're gonna put people in here to compete to become a model and then eliminate them over challenges? I was like, hell yeah, I'm into it. Um, I don't think that I understood the gravity of what I was seeing, like in terms of exploitation. Um, I do think Tyra has cemented herself in the media aspect of like, birthing a lot of careers for people, or just giving them their kind of first start. And then they went that and then kind of took it on. You got Eva Marcel, you got Yaya, you got so many other names over the 20 something seasons that she had. But to watch it back now as a 35-year-old adult in 2026, you see the difference, right? You see like, oh, you didn't have to show this. You chose to show this. And in doing so, what does that do to the person? Yeah, you're making TV, but you're making TV with real people.
Yeah,
And it wasn't something well, one of those reality shows like early Real World where it's this true like social experiment and you kind of see what goes on and you just kind of let people interact in their typical habitat. This was manufactured, right?
yeah,
And you got to see the behind the scenes in creating a TV show. So once you have a hit, you want it to still be a hit. And, body image, sexual exploitation, the attack on mental health. And it was so interesting. The two things for me with that documentary was Tyra didn't seem to take any accountability of it, right? Like what's done is done. You say, hey, I did this. This was great TV and I wanted all this exposure for these girls and even guys in later seasons, right? And how you expand that. But to say like, I can now look back on that and say this was handled incorrectly, or I could have done this. Like she didn't do that. She was just like, I made a TV show. And the TV show one year made me $176 million. Like, I'm cool with that, right? So that part is a little disheartening when you hear somebody who obviously contradicts themselves to say, I want to create this model competition and I want to break down these barriers for, height and body types and race and all of these things. But then you become a part of the machine, a cog in the wheel, if you will, and perpetuate some of these things. So reality TV ain't really real. Let's let that be known. But from the documentary perspective, it was like, damn, Tyra, like, fess up.
yeah, and because from a documentary standpoint, I think that that's part of the goal, right? When you're making a documentary or when you're making a film in that capacity, I feel like a large goal of it is to peel back the curtain. So you want to get the real, you want to see how somebody views something now that time has passed, now that you're not in the storm of it. And I think it's very reasonable to have a hope that Tyra, while you can say that you created something legendary, like which you did, and while you did have careers that were helped, there were a lot of careers that weren't helped. And I wonder what that thing with accountability is, because whether you want to talk about it from a network perspective, because another documentary I think about is the one on The Biggest Loser and how that was a huge show, but and again, like for both for America's Next Top Model and The Biggest Loser, I was aware of these shows. I wasn't necessarily watching them in real time, like chronologically, but just understanding the premise of them. But when I'm watching The Biggest Loser documentary and I'm realizing, so you telling me these people had all these unhealthy ways of losing weight just to ultimately, for a good majority of them, to gain all the weight back anyway later.
Mhm.
This becomes more about exploitation. It becomes more about manipulation for the sake of TV ratings and sales. So there's an accountability aspect from like network perspective in that aspect as well, because you are dealing with real people. Like whatever scope you want to look at this reality TV in, the most important thing should be that these are real people, real humans. But also, I think that the accountability thing could potentially be generational as well. I think of Tyra and not only the generation she grew up in and the time that she just was raised in general. I think about the clip that kind of has been floating around this week as well. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's the clip. It was like this men's roundtable. Like I know Luke James was there, but Clifton Powell was there, and there were some other like younger guys there. And a lot of the clips I've seen has been Clifton Powell essentially being relatively aggressive in his defense of being told that like him becoming accountable in his old age is like not acceptable because like if you were doing something for X amount of years, like 20, 25 years, and it took until you got older and realized you might be closer to the end to want to change your ways, like you can do better than that. Like that's not acceptable, may not be the best word, but like you can do that earlier. You know what I'm saying? And so I wonder, how do you feel about this idea that accountability might also fall into being somewhat of a generational thing as well, wherein certain people that come from a certain era just have a more difficult time with accountability than maybe we might in a world where we grew up with that being something that was kind of like pushed and taught more, from childhood even to in our adulthood.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody at any stage of life can take accountability for something that's big or small, right? But I do think that there is a generational layer to it because accountability also begets emotional intelligence.
Mm,
And not to say that our older generations are not emotionally intelligent, but like it wasn't exercised the same way, right? Vulnerability, accountability, apologizing, those things didn't happen in the abundance that they typically do with younger generations. So I'm not gonna fault Tyra, Clifton Powell, whoever these other people may be, that didn't take accountability sooner, right? It's no timeline on that,
right.
right? But take accountability once it's presented to you to say like, oh, damn. I didn't see that as a problem then. I can see it now because I'm older, I'm wiser, situations are different. Somebody brought it to my attention, right? But in the case of Tyra, not to, bash on a black woman during Melanated March Women's History Month, but um you had an opportunity to see things differently these many years later, right? So when the facts are presented to you, when they asked like, "Oh, can you tell me about the Shandy incident?" and she was like, "Hmm." Like she played coy, like she didn't recall. When they showed another clip where Tyra had a TV show and brought Shandy on, and that was like a talking point. So it's like, girl, you know what the hell's going on. Just fess up. Like it's fine. And I think that when people are in positions of power, and this goes way beyond Tyra, But
Yeah.
when people are in positions of power and have built some level of status and empire or whatever, for them to take accountability, their empire and status crumbles in some way. And people are so like magnetized to being on top.
Yeah.
Dare I say America's Next Top Model. But I don't know. When you amass that like power and wealth and all of those things, I feel like it's harder and harder to admit fault because now you have to admit like your ethics were in question.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder about the relationship between like there's accountability and then there's also the reality of like what you're being held accountable for. And I think I could imagine that scares a lot of people, especially like if it's an ethics thing, because like you could just be wrong and have handled the situation wrong and take
Mhm.
accountability, right? But when that situation includes something that like ethically one might argue or one might critique and say, I I question whether you just ignored your awareness of this situation in this decision you made at the time. And can you be accountable for something that you might have known was wrong in real time and you just decided against it for whatever the reason? Not that that makes the accountability different, but I think that puts into perspective what the person who has to take accountability is facing. And it doesn't mean that they shouldn't, be taking accountability, but to your point of how they're magnetized to the power and their status, when you got to fess up to certain things that that you're not surprised you on the hook for to begin with, that
Mhm.
that makes accountability that much more difficult. So yeah, it's we're in the age of documentaries and revisiting things to talk about now 15, 20 years later. So Tyra won't be the only one. She
No.
ain't the only one currently. You know what I'm saying? But there'll be more. So this will be a conversation for for the foreseeable future. I feel like, but just depends on who's next. But
The biggest takeaway with that too, as we check out, is that everybody can be bought.
mm,
Everybody can be bought. If we're looking in the context of reality TV, Tyra had this idea. She pitched this idea of all networks at the time. UPN picked it up,
right,
um, and then it became this massive thing that then just had to be topped and had to be topped and had to be topped. And like success is a drug. You want more of it. So she was bought, even if, let's just say, even if she felt like she didn't want to do something, there was a contract on the table and the network said, you need to produce this.
yeah,
Who's to say that Tyra wasn't leading herself? But the same thing with Bad Girls Club, if you remember that. Now, that wasn't competition reality, but I was into it. But originally, Bad Girls Club was started as this kind of reality TV take on rehabilitation,
mm,
essentially. Like you get these bad girls that did all of these things. Now they come together and they're going to work on being a better them. Did they argue and did they fight? Yeah, but like they still had to work together and there was supposed to be some camaraderie.
yeah,
That then just turned into seasons of girls fighting, and now we have a spinoff of that on Zeus Network with Natalie Nunn and Baddies.
yeah.
It's 43 minutes of just people arguing and punching each other. That's
Basically,
it. There's no other basis there. But Natalie Nunn is making $1 million or so off of these girls, and she thinks it's fine. But she can be bought. She might have thought that that was cute when she was on the show, but now she's on here saying like, "Oh yeah, we all gonna get along, and we gonna do this, and we gonna work together for women empowerment," and they beat each other ass like bloody to the
but
point like it did. Like everybody can be bought. So with that, I say release the Epstein files.
look, you said head, buddy, and bowed. Release them files. And somebody who deserves a shout out as we wrap up this reality TV part, Monique can't be bought. She really wanted to take them girls to charm school and turn them girls' life around. That's who y'all need to be doing these shows. Y'all want to work on women empowerment. Get Monique in there to get these girls together. That's who y'all need. That's the real savior. This is who y'all need to be talking
Yes,
about. God damn it. Okay.
absolutely. Those that cannot be bought are blacklisted. So there we go. I just
You're gonna have me doing that for the rest of the year.
Listen, I love me some Monique, and Charm School was a blessing to reality TV. Yeah, there was still some like stuff in that, but the larger scheme, Monique was really trying to grow the girls and do something there, and was like, okay, cool. So it was, I didn't feel like that was one of those exploitation kind
Right.
of shows. But when you have a formula that networks see that makes money, then you're like, okay, hey, everybody can be bought, and those that cannot are blacklisted. Case in point, Monique. I love me some Monique.
Nah, same, same.